Brittany, we are back for another episode of the E Word. It's exciting. I'm good. I've been super busy the past couple of weeks, just getting all of my to-dos in order. When you start making a list of all the things you have to do and you start to look at it, it becomes very overwhelming. But I think I have a process now for focusing a little bit better than I have in the past. So I'm ticking things off. It feels good to tick things off. You know?
Yeah. Can you share a little bit about what that process is, or is that to be continued?
It's still to be continued, but over the years, I have always tried to find a particular system that didn't annoy me when things popped up in front of me in terms of what I had to do, because I ultimately am not the best list maker. Like, something that I put on the list is really a multi-step process, right? So it, and some things are, oh, I can do this in 3 minutes. And so, but I also didn't want it to live outside of, I guess, my calendar. So I never truly properly used Google Tasks. It's very simple. Um, and while, you might want some more bells and whistles, for me, the simplicity is perfect. And I can see like this whole board in front of me. I guess it's kind of like a Trello board or maybe a Asana board. But those things live outside of my calendar. And you kind of look at all of those things, and I have them in different categories. And it's sorted by the date. So I could say, hey, today I'm supposed to work on these 3, 4 things. And then I can move the dates around fairly easily because I'm mostly accountable to myself. And I don't have to feel so bad about it because, you feel bad when you keep seeing things that you're missing. It will say past, but I can be like, okay, that could just go for next week. So this is working for me for the past couple of weeks, and we'll see if it keeps working. I will.
Yes.
I will. But we're going to talk about something more exciting than my task list today. Right.
Yes. Yes. Well, it sounds like your task list was kind of a plot twist to how you're normally functioning, right? You had to
Yeah.
switch something. It wasn't working. You had to pivot.
Right. Totally.
And there's a certain wisdom in that, right? So when we're talking about eudaimonia, when we're talking about the seven virtues, if you're unfamiliar with that, go back, what, 2, 3 episodes, and we're breaking that down. But I think embracing the pivot is really one of the most, if not the most valuable skill right now.
I totally agree. I mean, with what's going on in the political environment, in the economy, particularly with certain demographics, pivoting is the top skill that
Yes.
that you have to embrace. And I think it's about recognizing where you are, what the environment is, and then trying to figure out your place in the world and how you might have to shift in order to recalibrate and take your place in a new way in this world. And that's okay. It's experimentation. Yeah.
Exactly. Uh, and I think there's some other people who are okay with it. So I am in the midst of a pivot, more to share soon, which I'm really excited about.
Okay.
And so I was just scrolling through my timeline and I saw Tabitha Brown. Are you familiar?
Yeah, I know a little bit about her, but we
You
should
know?
share more about her for the audience.
Yes. For those who are unfamiliar, Tabitha Brown is an actress, an influencer, an inspiration to many. I believe she still has a children's show on Netflix. She kept many of us company during the pandemic with words of inspiration and recently had a licensing deal with Target where she licensed her image for a number of uh, vegan products, food products. I think she had maybe like a hair care line, some houseware items as well. She is a vegan, and I think that's part of what drew people to her is that she's making vegan cooking and the vegan lifestyle a little bit more accessible, flavorful to people who were unfamiliar with it. Am I missing anything?
I think you got everything: actress, author, cook, influencer, business
Ah,
owner, creator. The ultimate portfolio career example.
and such a ray of sunshine, at least from my perspective. I've come across her posts, and so her post on, I want to say maybe it was last Tuesday, the 2nd, um, she posted a video and she just said, look, there's nothing wrong with getting a job for a little while. And her video was targeted toward entrepreneurs. And she made it clear that she wasn't trying to discourage anyone, but she said, and I quote, entrepreneurship, it's not for everybody. That doesn't mean it's not for you. But right now, these last few months, few years, she says, baby, if it ain't been working for you and you're doing a lot of robbing Peter to pay Paul, it's time for you to get a job. Initial thoughts, impressions?
Well, given her background and just the context of her total brand and personality, I am personally not offended by that opinion. And let's be clear, it's her opinion.
Right.
And it's her opinion based on the collection of her experiences. So oftentimes we look to successful people and we want to know how they got it done. You know, what was their mindset? What were the specific steps they took? We look to them for advice and counsel. She's offering free advice and counsel, again, from her perspective on her social media channel.
Yeah,
But what is, you know, a little concerning is the minute people don't like what that is, then they add some other layers to it that may or may not have been there.
exactly. And I should note that Tabitha is also, she's also very open about her faith. And so in the video, she says, you can have a dream, you can have a goal, you can have a vision that God has given you, and you can still have a job while pursuing it. Talking to the people who burnt all their bridges up, who burnt your bridges because you refused to get a little side hustle or a job to have income coming in while pursuing your passion. Uh, I'm not talking to the people who are trying to get jobs. I'm not talking about the people who do have a little job and think they're still hard. I'm not talking about you. And this was in a separate video that she needed to post to clarify because there was such outrage and such a strong response. I was actually really surprised by how strong the response was to what she said because I thought what she said was emblematic of the conversations that I've been having, seeing, had among so many entrepreneurs. You know, I think it's just part of the journey, right? Entrepreneurs have that journey where there's ups and downs, and sometimes, you know, those pivots are important to sustain yourself. I don't think anybody's asking for you to starve in the messy middle, right?
No, it's just one pathway, right?
Right.
So many of the the previous models of entrepreneurship uh, really looked like a very straight line to success. You work hard, you dig deep, you focus, you ignore everything else around you, and success will come to you. And that really happens for a few people, right? But like you said, the messy middle, people really don't talk about the messy middle because it is messy. It's not clean and clear. But that's the part that people really need to understand is it's not this straight shot to the top. Many times you have to, as we talked about in the beginning, pivot and pivot a few times, not just one time. It might be 3, 4, 5, 10 times until you get to the place where you need to be. And when I hear her say that, I feel like she's specifically talking to the people where it may just not be working in the way that you envisioned it right now, and you're struggling. And you have a choice. That choice is to continue the struggle and suffer, to have that amazing story where you rise to the top, right? Which could be possible. Or you pivot to create some stability for yourself so that you can now refocus and do what you have always dreamt to do. That's what I hear from what she says.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, you're in marketing. I understand the value of having the straight shot story. It's easy to digest, it's quick, it's punchy, and it's aspirational. And for many people, it's inaccessible.
Yeah.
So we know that for many entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs who are women, that that messy middle is complicated by familial obligations, whether it's children, parents, significant others. There's tons of things that kind of tug at your attention, and there's rarely the expectation that you silo yourself and dig in and focus and wear the same t-shirt 3 months in a row and eat ramen for a year. There are women who are doing it, but that's rarely the expectation for some of the unicorns or the women that we see, right? The expectation is that you are friendly, that you're affable, that you're likable, that you're doing great work and you look great doing it. And that just seems kind of disjointed, right? It doesn't seem aligned with the more marketable story. But you were the marketing expert, so I defer to you there.
No, that's true. We always want to have a great story to tell, and as an entrepreneur, you're supposed to build that story, right? People buy into you as a person rather than to the brand more readily, the brand you're trying to build. And sometimes that's synonymous with the brand. And as you get bigger, then those things separate. And so I think that story is critical. But the other piece too, which is I think part of this story, is access to capital. And, women have less access. Black women have lesser access to capital. I could just kind of think of in my past, for example, my friend and I, we always wanted to be entrepreneurs and we were really fond of experimentation. At one point, I had my job at HBO, but I was still doing my entrepreneur ventures on the side. And at some point, I stopped working. I actually left HBO, went to another company, but I left that company to go full throttle on the music business. We were in music at the time, and we started our own independent record label, and we put out an artist, and she was doing really, really well. However, we ran out of money.
Mm.
And so that actually stopped that business, that independent record label, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure we were the first female Black owned independent record label. If not the first, then maybe the second, but we were pioneers in that space. But because we lost access to capital, that was the end of that story. And so that's really critical.
By the way, I just want to be clear to our listeners that I too am learning this for the first time and endlessly impressed once again. So more on that later, but okay.
Yes. But anyway, I'm just telling that story to say that there's so much further that she and I could have gone if A, we had access to capital, B, particularly in the music industry, people really didn't take us seriously as women because of who we were. And even while we were doing it, we put a man in front of us who worked for us, but we put him as like the main face in order to get access to certain rooms and situations to help us, get to where we wanted to go. But ultimately, it came down to the money. So you can have a great story, but it has to be backed by that access and that capital. And that's something that, you know, we all, well, many of us lack in the same way that don't have access to it in the same way that other groups may have access to it.
And to put some numbers behind it, on average, we know women tend to receive less than 1% of any sort of venture capital. Black women especially get less than 0.5%, and it's closer to a quarter of 1% than anything. And that is troubling for a lot of reasons, right? Because you are now having to bootstrap every last bit of your business, every payroll, every new program, right? It gets expensive. And so, I know that from my experience, you know that from your experience. So in seeing Tabitha speak about this, I didn't at all feel offended.
No.
Or I wasn't activated by this in any particular way. But for me, it was more so if we scope out even sharing her opinion at the time where we see a lot of headlines about 300,000 Black women within the past 6 months, I believe, or having lost their jobs, and this being, what does this mean for the American economy? What does it mean not only for these women in this group, but the country? A lot of people seem to take what she said as insensitive in light of that happening. And I see them as two different conversations, but I don't know. With that backing, do you receive her messaging any differently?
No, because I think one thing that we as users of these platforms, as people who engage with these different personalities, have to understand or remember is, yes, context in the moment matters, but we also have to layer in full context of the person's brand, personality, and experiences. And so no one wants to be judged for one moment, right, without that full context. And I feel like that's what happens way too often when people speak out about something. Social media is in many ways an informal opportunity to connect with your audiences. It would be much different for me if she did a written piece in Forbes or wherever.
Sure.
Because there's an opportunity to, research different aspects of that and formulate an opinion about, the topic in a more in-depth and meaningful way. This is a clip, essentially, right? And it does not, to me, represent her full opinion about anything. Like, you want to be able to have a discourse with her. Like, if we were on a panel or a fireside, she would make that comment and we do some back and forth around it. And then you would have fuller context. So we need to allow people that grace, and too often everything is looked at in a very siloed way and judged and blown up from that perspective. And that's why it doesn't change anything for me.
Yeah. And that's really my concern is it too late for us to consider context? Is it too late for us to value context? Because again, I admit I prefer longer form social media because it is hard to gain context. You have to be immensely talented to get your point across in 90 seconds or less. And even then, people are going to want you to expound, to say, to go further, to share other opinions. So a longer form really does lend itself to getting the message across, but the timeline is harsh, right? That's
Right.
so many impressions before she had to put out a second video to clarify her statements because of, and I wonder if sometimes there's a commitment to misunderstanding,
Mm,
so that people can get across whatever it is that they want to platform, right? So
yeah,
yeah,
I agree with that. Uh, the social discourse isn't always honest
right,
and and meant to elicit positivity.
right,
And it is meant to stir the pot in many ways. And also, we're intrigued by that. If
yes,
we're being honest, right? We like the controversy. You know, let's also be honest, like would we be talking about this if there was no controversy today? And so we all contribute to that in some form or fashion and have to be critical about what we're viewing, what we're seeing, right? It's just like now when I'm on social and I see a video, I have to now ask myself, is this AI?
yeah.
And it's getting harder and harder
To
to
tell
tell.
the difference. Just for
Yeah.
our listeners, the videos of the cats flipping pancakes, or dogs jumping on trampolines, and they can be really great, right? Look at this security footage of these bears enjoying time on a trampoline. It's
Hmm.
not real, so
Right. But then there
um,
are other things that are people interacting in a certain way. And you're like, wait a second,
right.
is this real or did this really happen?
Thinking,
You
what
know?
do the hands look like? You
Exactly.
um, sometimes you look in the background, and yeah, that people's faces are distorted in these really gnarly ways. And so you
Hmm.
have to, again, you probably spend more time trying to discern whether or not it's AI than you did consuming the content.
Exactly. And we can even pull it back. Like sometimes because of what's going on out there in the world, people will post content that actually is old, but we don't know that it's old and we think it is happening today because it adds to whatever discourse is going on. And so we're also not used to doing the research to vet the information for ourselves. And it's a lot of work to do it, right? When you're really on the platform to be entertained for the most part, right?
You want to have this 3, 5, 7 minute video and then continue to scroll without a second thought. And that also lends itself to increasingly binary thinking
Mhm.
that concerns me, right? So if I
Mhm.
agree with her or disagree with her, then turns to I love her, I hate her. And
Right.
everything else is just confirmation bias at the same, right? So I generally have a positive view of Tabitha Brown. I find her to be warm, at least from what I've seen and how she conducts herself. And she's availing herself of the internet, right? This is part of the internet. Um, and I can hold space to say, oh, I agree with this point. Maybe I don't agree with this point. Maybe, there's, I can hold space for the nuance. But that space is rapidly shrinking for all of us, right? Because
Yeah.
if you don't agree with everything, you're an enemy.
Yeah. And that space and grace is really important because we're also making assumptions. So we're assuming, or the dissenters are assuming that she she knew the jobs numbers. Like they're assuming that she's relating it to that. They're assuming that all of this is part of her content. Right. But the people who are defending her, like me and you, were also assuming that she didn't know. All right. Or that it wasn't part of it. We don't know at the end of the day. So part of me is like, okay, ask her.
Right.
And then once she answers, then you can have an opinion about that answer. Right. And it could still go down a rabbit hole. If she says, no, I wasn't aware, then you can be like, well, how don't you know? Like this, that, and the third.
You know this,
Yeah.
you know, these people support you and this is not what you're doing, and there's no grace because it could
No.
be I was on a flight and I didn't pay for the Wi-Fi. I was taking a nap. I was spending time with my children. Like there's so many reasons and ways that it could say, she could be shooting her show and in the middle say, you know what, this is something that I've been feeling that's been on my heart. Again, maybe informed by private conversations that she's had with people in her circle who have said, you know what, I need to supplement my income because what I thought would support it did not. In the
Mm-hmm.
past, she's spoken about her journey to being an actress and how she's had to do things in the interim and lean on her husband for support. And, uh, you know, again, she didn't take off, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until the pandemic when she was sitting at home like the rest of us and decided to make content about her life, her lifestyle choices, eating, food, all of that type of stuff. Who knew?
Exactly. And so her journey, when we talk about pivots too, is like a very slow start and then boom, which is great. But it took a while to get to this point. And now she's here and she's offering her perspective. We also don't know, like, why did she even decide to make that comment? Right? Like, what prompted her to do that? What could be a simple answer? Of course, I'm making this up, but she could have been somewhere talking to somebody who was struggling in this moment. She gave that piece of advice and she was like, oh, maybe I should just share that with everyone because it could help a few more people. Like I helped this person who thought it was good advice. I mean, that's often what sparks anything that I write. So again, nuance, grace, and space, I think are key lessons we have to take from anything we engage with on the internet. And also, to your point about recognizing our own biases and how that plays into how we view what we engage with.
Right. Right. Because I think even to interpret it in a way that is harmful
Mm-hmm.
is to suggest that even having to do that would be there's something shameful about
Mm.
it, which could lead to another conversation. But I don't know. I don't know. And so when I think about the E word, when I think about pneumonia and a life well lived, it's to me um, often being grounded and admired in conflict and helping people see their way through, right? Closing that gap between what we want and what we're experiencing. Very often, the key to closing that gap is embracing the change that you're confronted with.
Yeah.
And so when I see these pivots, or these plot twists, as I like to call them, um, very often it leads to things that you didn't know. Who
Mm-hmm.
knew if Tabitha Brown kept sending out, her headshots and said, staying away from social media, I don't know that she would be a household name. I don't know that
Right.
she would be in people's cupboards and on people's TV screens. But
Here she
that's
is.
I guess.
And she's using the platform, and there's going to be good and there's going to be bad with it that comes with it. And I mean, you have to be ready for any of that. But one thing you said made me just want to pose this question. although I'm not sure how to really word it. So I'll say it and then maybe I have to correct it. But when we think about conflict and we think about the people making comments, and we just talked about some of the just genuinely like dishonest commentary, why do people want to have this conflict? Or specifically, why do they want to have this conflict with her? Because they could easily watch it and keep moving and not comment at all, right? But they choose to engage in this and create this level of conflict that's hard to manage, I think, because you're trying to Tabitha is trying to, especially with her second post, right, communicate, no, I didn't mean this, I meant that, but she's kind of doing it one way. So we have access to this person to say what all sorts of positive and inflammatory things.
Yes.
And their ability to respond is limited in the traditional conflict management.
Right. Absolutely. So I'm just going to check really quickly because I don't want to misquote my numbers.
Yeah.
When it comes to Threads, which is the space where I saw this, she's actually an Emmy award-winning host. We forgot that, but she has 1.1 million followers. She being Tabitha Brown. You're absolutely right. Her ability to respond to however many responses there were to that video, severely limited. Okay? She just couldn't, it's not going to happen. Okay? So there were, with that particular post, 649 people directly responded. Even then, sizable. Yeah. The number of people it reached, so people reposting it or quoting it, over 100 people doing that. So if you, and you may say, oh, okay, it's only 100. To sit there and make 100 different videos to respond to what people are saying, to make 649 different videos, to type out 649 different responses, it's not happening.
Yeah, not at all.
Most people do not have the time or interest in doing that. So I think to answer your question, why do people do it? Because it platforms them. It's always going to benefit them, right? In this particular space, there's a power imbalance. But the great thing about social media is that you have access to people you normally wouldn't have access to. You might have written a strongly worded letter before, whereas now you can post a video response, you can tag Tabitha, and if she responds to you, that vaults you to a level of visibility you would never have reached otherwise, right? If she chooses to respond, her 1.1 million followers may have eyes on you. And then the question becomes, do you have anything of value to offer in response?
Right.
That's the challenge with virality, right? A lot of people, I think, get that huge dopamine rush saying, oh my gosh, all of these people are liking or commenting or, whatever. The question is, what happens after that? What else do you have to offer? And if it's just simply to show up to disagree with a particular figure, that's not much, I don't think.
I mean, you're right. I oftentimes when I'm, on Instagram or whatever, I decide if I'm going to comment or not. And part of my decision making is, does it really matter if I comment or not?
Right.
Why do I feel the need to comment, positively or negatively? Because I actually am not looking for anyone to respond to me, to be honest.
Exactly.
And sometimes I do comment. Most of the times it's just about, I feel like I need to express my feelings,
Yeah.
right, about it and move on. And sometimes my feelings aren't that nice, and those are usually when I don't comment. Usually I'm not saying that, because I'll write something out and then I'm like, why am I doing this? And then
Yeah.
I delete it. So like I understand the whole what comes next part is a very important question you need to ask yourself. Like, why are you doing this? Do you need to just express yourself
Yeah.
and it's one and done and keep it moving? Or do you really want to engage in a meaningful dialogue and debate different points of view? I think also the medium matters.
Yes.
As I complained to you before, you introduced me to Reddit, and so now,
I love it.
and so occasionally I will post
Yeah.
my opinion and go back and forth with various people.
Right. Because you have long form responses, you're also going to get long form responses, and people have a little bit more space to be nuanced and thoughtful. Not that they always are,
Right.
but there's more space to discuss things, you know, in depth. So quick bravo housewives
Huh.
tangent. It's relevant, I promise. Karen Huger of Real Housewives of Potomac fame was recently released after serving almost a year for her uh, driving while under the influence. And local news stations were interviewing people who showed up.
Mm-hmm.
One of which was a woman who became Reddit famous, if that is a thing, because she went to the public trial and she was posting live updates of Karen's trial during the trial. So much so that the judge had an open warning saying, whoever is posting should stop. So there are thousands of people who now, and she herself, she's an accountant, right? She said, I'm an accountant. I work from home. My boss also loves the show and is like totally fine with me being here, So it makes the world smaller. And in some ways, it can be affirming and nice to know that the world is smaller in that way. And then other times, not so much.
I mean, you're right. We're talking about Tabitha, we're talking about the pros and cons of social media. There's a definite pro, which is, again, we also talk about access. It gives people access. It gives people a voice in a way that wasn't there before. I think another episode we should talk about, is that voice good? Or like, what was the world like when we didn't have that level of access? Was it better or was it worse? And what are the pros and cons of that? Because the fact that an accountant can just become Reddit famous for, posting about housewives is like crazy, right? But also amazing in the same vein, right? So what does that
Provided
mean?
we agree with her, right? Because
Provided
now,
we agree. Yeah.
before she was anonymous, she could just post, but now if people don't like the way she looks, or people want to dig more into her life, or they disagree with her opinion, and then they reach out to her business. Like, that's the double-edged sword of it all.
That's true. But I'll point this part out, at least for me on Reddit, is I'll post and people will agree, which I like.
All right.
I like very much. And
Yes.
I will upvote them. They agree. And then the people I disagree with, I don't like. However, and it might take me longer to respond, but I will always respond. And I'm practicing trying to respect that other point of view, because I post my housewife stuff. So I have a very strong opinion about it, and I feel like everybody should agree with what I'm saying. So this is actually training me to respond to people of a complete opposite opinion about something for whatever odd reason I deeply care about, and have a fruitful dialogue right? Where there's an agreement or disagree, or I try to find a point of agreement. And even if they're coming for me, because they don't know it's me, right? But they're coming for me, I recognize it's not personal because they don't know who I am. And I'm intentionally trying to flip it so that they now feel bad for disagreeing with me. Now, they will still disagree. But we've gotten to a place where if we were actually in the same room, we wouldn't be fighting about it, because sometimes it will start off as a little bit of a fight. So that's my personal challenge to myself when I ever see someone that disagrees. So I would just encourage the viewers to kind of take this tactic. It's a very safe way, right, to practice this art of conflict resolution on social in a very weird way. But I like to do I like everything that I do to kind of teach me something, especially if I'm spending hours on it for some ridiculous reason. And so this is one of my methods, so to speak. And it's, like you said, it's easier to do on Reddit. It's harder to do on Instagram, or a little bit on Threads too. But I want everyone to just stop and think, leverage our 5 virtues. We have the framework called SPENT. So just to say them for everybody, Sophia, which is, understanding why something matters. P is phronesis, which is use good judgment. E is episteme, which is know the facts.
Come with the receipts, people.
Yes. N is for nous, which is trust your intuition. And T is techne, which is make it real. So at the very least, we want people to use good judgment. We want people to know the facts. And we also want people to understand why all of this matters. And then leverage context in trying to understand why all this matters. And then when you actually comment, which is making it real, be thoughtful in those responses. That's what I'm saying. All right, good. So I'll leave it there then.
Leave it
there. So if you commented on Tabitha's post, go back and check your comments and make sure the SPENT framework applies. That's your action item.
Yep.
All right, Brittany, it's always fun talking to you.
Dude, see ya.
See ya. Bye, Mina.